Hello and welcome. Luke Malevich here, ChicagoJazzTrombone.com, and today I'd like to talk to you about ghosting notes. This is something that I've been doing for many years. It's not something that anybody's ever really taught me how to do, and I don't feel like anybody's really showed me how to do it as far as the mechanical aspects of it. And something I've had to figure out, by listening to a lot of players and just kind of messing around with different things to get the proper effect that I was hearing on records. And in this video, I'm going to focus on why and how. So why I use this technique and how I do it, my approach to it versus the how as far as how to put it into your lines. It's just how in the physical aspect of the technique. Now I will preface this with that this is my preferred technique. I use it a lot especially in my improvising, but the disclaimer is that I do practice everything. So I practice double tonguing, I practice triple tonguing, and I practice doodle tonguing as well, as I suggest to all my students and musicians that you really want to be able to work on every single technique and be able to put every single technique into practice. That doesn't mean I can doodle tongue like Bob McChesney, because I cannot do that, but I have worked on the technique enough to be able to use it in solos, to use it as an effect, or to use it in lines. Same thing with double tonguing and triple tonguing. But today, let's focus on ghosting notes. So I kind of categorize these into two separate ones, and I don't think I've heard this used anywhere before. Maybe it's just kind of terms that I came up with. And there's hard ghosted notes and soft ghosted notes. At least that's how I think about them. And they're on the opposite sides of the spectrum. There are obviously things in the middle, and different players might be leaning towards one or the other. But I'll deal with the two opposite sides. And the simplest way to explain it really is that with hard ghosting, the notes of the air rather stops completely, whereas with soft ghosted notes, the air continues through, which is why I oftentimes prefer the soft ghosted approach, because my approach to the instrument is based on air and airflow, and I want to make sure that I have as much air and as relaxed the amount of air going through continuously. But the last week or so, I've been focusing on the other part of it. I've been focusing more on the hard ghosted note approach as I do work on everything. So first of all, let's start with the hard ghosted notes. I'll demonstrate a couple things with just air, and then I'll play a couple examples for you. So if you were to kind of hear me do it without the instrument, it would sound something like this. Where my tongue is hitting kind of on the bottom of my upper teeth, and it's hitting pretty quickly. I'm keeping it low so that I'm able to move it back and forth as fast as I need to, in order to have ghosted notes while stopping the air completely. So if I were to do something similar, and this does bring more of a Frank Rossellino approach to mind, especially when you hear it. So I'll demonstrate it one more time, and I'll do the same rhythm on the instrument. As you can hear rather, the notes tend to be more choppy, more separated, and that's why I call it hard ghosting. And if I kind of put it into practice while I'm playing a solo, this isn't a technique that I can do really, really quickly, just because of the nature of the fact that my tongue stops the air completely. And so I use it, maybe I might use it a little bit more in a ballad or something slightly slower, because it can have a really, really strong sense of swing to it. So that's how I deal with hard ghosted notes. And I do want to mention something else. I was thinking about mentioning this before I started, and it came to me now. is the Y, which I forgot to address, and I'll do that in between the two. I use this approach because I feel specifically maybe even the soft ghosted notes, which I'll demonstrate next, is because it allows me more control over the phrases. It allows me more control over what notes I want to accent versus, let's say, doodle tonguing or double tonguing, which kind of forces everything to be really precise and really even. And that's not how I improvise. And the players who I came to admire and who I hear in my head when I'm playing solos are kind of the players that have influenced me the most don't do those types of articulations. And again, with ghosting notes, I'm able to even be able to swing the notes a little bit more if I'm playing a tune that's specifically swung, but or really hard swing. But I use them in Latin tunes, bossa nova, sambas, basically anything. Because again, it allows me more control over what I'm going to do with the line, where it allows me to accent certain notes more than others. Now, let's move on to soft ghosted notes. With this approach, I will not be cutting off the ear completely. So what I do is I kind of oftentimes shift my tongue a little bit to the right side, and I'm still using the front of my tongue. It might sound a little bit like doodle tongue, but it's since I'm using the front of my tongue, it's not a double articulation. I'll block part of the air, almost like half valving a note, but still leave enough coming out that you'll be able to hear a sound. Not a full sound, but that's kind of the nature of ghosting notes. So I'll demonstrate it now without the instrument. I'll just do a regular articulation, and then I'll put my tongue in place and hold that spot so you can hear the difference in air. So you can hear the air kind of speeds up. It doesn't produce a great sound, but for using this technique, that's not the point. Now I'll alternate between just a regular articulation and then a ghosted kind of articulation off to the side a little bit. You can really hear the air pop when I kind of remove my tongue from that place off to the side, and that's what allows me a lot more flexibility than other articulations with notes that I want to accent a little bit faster. Now, if I do the exact same thing when I'm playing, it sounds like this. If I hold that kind of ghosted note placement of my tongue, you can hear what happens when I'm going between a full sound and then a ghosted sound. So now I'll put it into practice, and I'll do the same sort of exercise that I did with the first one. Kind of a triple tonguing ghosted note approach, if you will. And everything, again, since I'm using the front of my tongue, I wouldn't classify it as a double tongue or a doodle tongue, even though it can sometimes sound like that. And as you can tell right away, it's a lot easier for me to play much quicker because I'm not stopping the air. Right when the air is flowing, that's when all the facility becomes much easier. But depending on what I'm doing, as I mentioned before, I might use the hard ghosted approach for a different tune. I'll do one more thing now where I'll alternate between the two. basically depends on what I'm doing. Sometimes, like, as I did now, I'll use both. And again, that's, hard ghosting, where I'm stopping the ear completely, and soft ghosting, where I'm allowing the ear to continue all the way through. And I'll also make another video down the line about how I create some of my lines with that approach, but it kind of boils down to listening to different players, and again, even singing a lot of lines, because when I tend to scat sing, the same tonguing that I'm using when I'm scat singing, I'll then go and use when I'm playing these lines. But this is as I'm looking at the time, a long video explaining the two. If you have any questions about this approach, what I do, you can always feel free to leave me a message, drop me an email. I'm always happy to chat. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the video.